Witches have been a complicated subject throughout history. In fact, witch hunts and trials have gone on for hundreds of years, culminating in the very famous Salem witch trials. And suffice it to say, it didn't really work out too well for all that were accused of becoming a witch. And even in more recent time, witches have been portrayed to luring your kids into the woods and stuffing them full of candy so they can eat them later, being green-skinned, nasty things, searching through Oz, trying to find Dorothy. They've also been portrayed as the very fashionable yet mischievous in the hit movie The Craft. Enter Septima. Septima is going to tell you a totally different story and completely change the way you think about them. See, in Septima, you are a leader of a coven of witches trying to become the next head Septima, and you do so by scoring points, of course. Or really, it's called wisdom, and you gain more and more wisdom by brewing potions and casting spells, ultimately trying to heal patients and win witch trials by inserting favorable people into the crowd to vote to spare the witches. And when you win, you gain things like wisdom. Septima at its core is a highly layered, strategic game that is sort of unlike anything else I've ever played. There certainly are some mechanisms that are similar to other things I've played, but after all said and done, this is actually a really unique and novel game that I don't think has gotten a fair shake, at least according to BGG. I mean, 7.5 at the time of this recording is nothing to sneeze at. However, I think this thing is doing some really fun things. And the more you play it and the more you understand kind of the meta characteristics of this game, I think the more you might fall in love with it. In fact, that's what's happened to me. So if all you need to know if this is a good game, stop it now. Just go grab it. It's good. It really is good. So we're going to go over what I think is a few different layers to the game that interact with each other. And I'm going to try to paint a picture for you on how those different interactions make this thing fun. The game is ran by playing cards. That's really it. You are choosing simultaneously, playing a card face down, and then checking to see if you match with anybody else. There's a couple different ways to match. You can match the same exact action with another player. You can also match with the Septima. The Septima has a rotating stock of these actions. And if you match with any of them, hey, it's really good because you get to do this bonus action on the card. However, if you do match, your suspicion goes up. And that's where we get into some issues, but we're going to come back around to that in just a little bit. So these actions are related to a couple different things. You are collecting resources or ingredients to brew potions, to heal patients, and all of those take a different card to do. You're also trying to manage the side game, or what feels like a side game at first, or at least it did to me, in these trial chambers. You're trying to get favorable people or your colored meeples essentially into the crowd, and then ultimately selected during the trial phase to make sure that the witch comes back to your coven and is not thrown out altogether. So I think the easiest way to understand this game is to go take a look at the table. So this is Septima. I think the main component here to really start with is the main board. And this board, your witch meeple will be running around and collecting resources depending on where the moon phase is. You see there's this little component in the bottom right corner that basically tracks the game on a timer. There's 4 seasons, and within 4 seasons, there are 5 moon phases. And every time that moon phase changes, there's 2 ingredients that are on each side of it. Those 2 ingredients are essentially eligible to pick up when you pay your collect card. So that's kind of one of the first dimensions here in your thought process as you are playing a collect card, moving around this map. You're trying to figure out, am I, first of all, in an optimal space next to the right resources for the particular moon phase? And if so, once that marker moves, am I losing my opportunity to get the right resources? The other part about this map that is interesting is in the middle, there's essentially a circle of sick patients, and you're trying to heal them. And each time you heal one of these patients, you move up on these patient tracks on your player board. These patient tracks add yet another dimension to this game in that you're trying to heal certain colors to get certain bonuses. So you'll look on the board and you can start by healing and moving up the ritual track, or untapping a spell or getting an extra spell, untapping a spell and moving up the ritual track. It goes on and on. But on the end game, depending on how high you are in each of these tracks, you'll gain wisdom. And then on top of that, there is a bonus wisdom awarded to the number of levels that all three are up. For every level that all three are up, you get an extra 6 wisdom. So you're playing this game of what extra bonuses do I want, along with can I get all of them up as high as possible. Being the misunderstood witch you are not trying to hurt anybody, you're just simply trying to heal them. And you do that with the potions that you're brewing after you collect the right resources. But those right resources are essentially on a timer, and being able to time those along with possibly trying to avoid a match is pretty crunchy. And why would you want to avoid a match? Because once again, I had said that it's good to match. You get extra stuff on all of these cards when you do match. Well, if you match, your suspicion goes up. And once your suspicion goes up, you have to, at the end of the particular moon phase, roll a hunter die. And you add that result to your suspicion level. And these hunters that are sitting around the map are going to move that number of spaces in pursuit of you if you are in their zone. So that is definitely something that you want to avoid. Why do you want to avoid it? It's because you'll lose a witch on your board. See, on your player board, you start with 2 witches, and each of these witches have really 2 purposes. First and foremost, they have special abilities. They make you more powerful, and you can collect up to 4 of these witches in winning trials in the future. But if you lose them, you're losing an ability. You're also losing the ability to score this end game goal. These in-game goals come by the way of these Book of Divination cards. They're a secret set of goals that gives you 4 opportunities for in-game goals and really huge points. In fact, if you can score them all, can be a huge percentage of your in-game score. The trick to that, though, is you can only score a number of these goals equal to the number of witches that you have on your board. So while those witches are giving you all of these really great abilities, they're also allowing you to score huge points at the end of the game. The suspicion track and the hunter hunting you, and you playing this game of, am I going to match? I'm trying to predict what the other player might play. You can talk about it, but they don't have to tell you the truth. It creates a bunch of friction. But then you also see that the Septima has a particular action as well that you either want to or don't want to match with, depending on how close you are to a hunter. But at that same time, if you're losing those witches, especially late in the game, you can't score those goals. And I've had instances that at the very last second, the very last turn, I'm looking at the Septima and I have to play a card in order to match that Septima in order to get the goal. But if I match it, I'm going to increase suspicion. Then that's going to make a hunter come after me. And then basically it comes down to a dice roll as to whether that hunter will catch me and take one of those witches away and totally make my action moot in trying to achieve that goal. This is something that was not really apparent early on when I started playing the game, but as you start to get into it and it starts to slow down a bit for you, this extra friction around getting witches early and keeping them and also balancing them against the types of goals that you have. And in fact, if you pursue these goals, like having to brew a bunch of potions and not use them, you're giving up a bunch of points on the board that you could have used those resources for. Like it could ask you to have extra resources or to have extra potions. And if you're holding those for that goal and you lose that witch at the very last moment, you're not going to score those points. And then there's potential points in those potions that you could have healed patients with, or some of the potions even give you kind of extra one-time use powers that could have changed the game for you as well. This concept of the hunter and suspicion and matching adds a ton to this game once you get into it. And it wasn't apparent in the very beginning for me. So now let's move over to the side of that board, and that is where a crowd and trial chamber are held. So each phase, a witch is drawn out of the stack and goes into the chamber, and that gives you the opportunity to be able to get that witch into your coven if you can win the trial. Also, when a witch is caught, it goes on to trial in the second chamber. And if that witch goes up there, there's going to be multiple trials. So what is a trial? Throughout the game, you're playing action cards, among other things, to get your meeples into the crowd. Why do you want that? They all go into a bag and they're drawn, and collectively between you and the other players in the game, if you beat out the angry citizens, there's these red citizens that go into the crowd equal to the number of kind of suspicion that you all collectively have that you're trying to beat out. And if you collectively beat, somebody will win the trial. The person with the most in that chamber actually gets to win the trial. You get points or wisdom. You get the witch into your coven, which is absolutely huge. And if you don't win, you can essentially take crowd picks. Crowd picks can be things like gathering extra resources, moving your witch around 4 spots, lowering suspicion, as well as resetting a spell. Which brings me to this ritual board. You see, the ritual board is added in the full game. When you initially play this game, you're really only playing with the components that I've already described. And in fact, after our first play, we came away with there didn't really feel like a lot to do. While there were interconnecting mechanisms and things that we didn't understand, it felt a little bit empty, but the ritual board, I think, totally solves that. The ritual board really kind of creates a programming component to your actions. You see, you'll start on one of the spaces down below, and at that point, you have 2 different paths to take depending on which action card you play. So the more often you're taking one of those actions that happen to be in front of you, the more often you can move up. Why do you want to move up? You get these spell cards, and these spell cards are absolutely unbelievable. There's some spell cards that allow you to just score extra points when you do something. I mean, one example is score 2 wisdom each time you lower your suspicion this season, and they're committed once and they're essentially tapped when you use them. But if you continue up on this ritual track, you can actually untap some of your cards. So that is sort of huge, especially if you get a really awesome spell early on. In this game, your brain starts to kind of cramp up a little bit with all of the different interacting constraints. You remember you're trying to collect the right resources at the right time. The right time may be the wrong time if you're near a hunter and you don't want to match with what you see the Septima has sitting out there. You're also trying to program your actions in a manner that moves you up that ritual track as fast as possible. You're also trying to position your witch out on the board in a manner to collect the right resources, but also to be next to the right patients to heal them, because you have to have the adjacency to those patients and they're constantly changing. And then you have to balance all of that with the spells that you happen to have in hand and how to best use those. And like I said, they change the game in so many different ways. At its heart, this game asks you to program actions in as efficient manner as possible with almost perfect information. And they throw that perfect information on its head with that matching mechanism. It's given you just enough doubt to create the tension, especially at the end game when you're really trying to make sure that you keep all those witches and you're trying to score all of those goals sitting on that Book of Divination card. It is a game that starts to really get your heart beating. And the game really got exciting for me the moment that I started to explore that ritual board and those spells and started to get some combos that synergized with what I was trying to do. The game on its outset really appears to be the 3 mini games, right? The main board where you're collecting, gathering, brewing potions, healing people, the side board, which is the trial chamber, and then that ritual track. But all of those start to work together in a really great and fun way that also starts to just grind down and put the lockdown on your brain, so it becomes really hard to make a decision. Really often I'm staring at my hand of action cards and trying to figure out when is the right time to play that collect, to get the right resource, trying not to match, or maybe trying to match because I want the bonus. But then at the same time, looking at that ritual track, which is easy to forget it's even there at some point, and trying to play the right action at the right time to jump up that board and get the overpowered spells that break the whole game for you. All of that adds up to just a really crunchy, fun game to play. And on top of that, this game is absolutely beautiful. Art is subjective, and I totally get that. In fact, that's why I don't go super deep a lot of the times into aesthetic, because I know, like, you know, one person's masterpiece is going to be trash to another. But this game, I think objectively looks really, really good. And I am playing with the deluxe version, and I will say the components on this deluxe version are second to none. I got the metal wisdom coins, which are just some of the best metal coins I've ever seen ever. The resource or the ingredient meeples are some of the most unique that I've ever seen. The tray that holds all of the potions is absolutely wonderful. The insert is really, really high quality. It's just the production is absolutely wonderful. And with that said, I don't think there's much else to say. It is a thinky, interconnected, multi-dimensional, fun action selection, action programming game with wonderful production that I will absolutely keep in my collection for a really long time. And I think this game's late delivery might have had an effect on its eventual ratings and popularity. I thought this thing would kind of come out on the heels of Voidfall being another Minecraft game and really just kind of shoot to the moon, but it really hasn't. And I want more people to check this thing out. And, you know, maybe as we come back around to Halloween next year, I know a lot of people were kind of complaining that they didn't have this game for Halloween. Maybe then it will get its due. I think Minecraft hit this one out of the park, and I think the aesthetic is going to drive it even further. And I imagine this game over time is going to continue to climb the ranks, but that doesn't matter to me. I have it, I'm keeping it, and it will be a staple in my collection for years to come. And that is Septima by Minecraft Games. If you enjoyed this review, maybe like and subscribe. I don't know. Either way, if you made it this far, I really appreciate it. And I'll see you next time.